Oh, that's all, everything's been unaudioed?
And yeah, the phone has not been on. I'm sorry.
Let's start with we'll start with Namo Tassa. We began the refuges and precepts and the whole introduction, ayahs, everything.
It's all right.
So we've already had the request for the refuges and precepts, and we're gonna start again with Namo Tassa so that it's on the recording for YouTube. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma tassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
And we'll do the refuges line by line. Bhutang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi bhutang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi bhutang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tisarana-gamanang nititang. Then we have the 5 precepts, and I'll do the Pali and repeat in Pali and then say the English. Sadhu.
Sadhu.
Panatipata veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature.
Adinadana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given.
Kame sumicha chara veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Kame sumicha chara veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct.
Musawada veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Musawada veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying.
Sura meraya majapamartatana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Sura meraya maja pamadatana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness.
This completes the taking of the 5 precepts, we'll now offer the 8 precepts in the same format. Panatipata veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature.
Adina dana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Adina dana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given.
Abrahmacharya veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Brahmacharya veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from any kind of sexual activity.
Musavada veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Musawada veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying.
Surha merya majapamadatana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Sura Maria Maja Pamadatana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness.
Vikalabhojana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Vikala Bhojana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from eating at inappropriate times.
Nacha gita vatita visukatasana malaganda vilepana dharana mandana vibhusanatana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Nacha Gita Wadita Visukadasana Malaganda Vilepana Dharana Mandana Vibhusanatana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from entertainment, beautification, and adornment.
Uchasayana mahasayana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami.
Uchasayana Sayana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying on a high or luxurious sleeping place.
Imani sikapadani silena sugatim yanti silena bogasampada silena niputim yanti tasma silang visodaye. These are the precepts for training. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore, let virtue be purified.
Sadhu.
Sadhu.
Sadhu, 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 sadhu. Thank you so much. Yes, this is definitely a celebration, a good way to spend a birthday.
Absolutely.
Did you just pin me or did I pin myself?
You were pinned before. It
Okay,
just
great.
automatically goes.
All right.
Yeah.
There we are. This is kind of like crying out for a need for
For tech support.
I am not a technical, this is not a lie. I am not a tech person. Okay, it's a,
I'm a Dhamma person.
so just keeping in the spirit of keeping our precepts. So this is a true statement. Yeah, so yeah, so this is so wonderful and a wonderful way to spend one's birthday is keeping the precepts and coming near to monastics. So it's just really a blessing for us. And today I had been thinking about what to share as far as a Dhamma talk. And I've been looking at the sutta. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya. It's the advice to Rahula at Mango Stone. It's a Amba Ati Kara Rahula Wada. It's a long, very long, it's Pali word, all one word. But it's when Rahula was the son of the Buddha, and the Buddha, of course, had a family before he went forth into monastic life, and just after Rahula was born, he left, and the Buddha left, and the Buddha really, I think, because in that day and age, it wasn't just the nuclear families where it was just mom, dad, and the kids. There was a larger family system. So his wife and his newborn were well cared for. It wasn't like there's a deadbeat dad kind of idea, maybe, that the Buddha was a deadbeat dad. But when Rahula was 7, he came back to the Buddha returned to his home, what they called a palace, I guess, his village, his town, and the his father was very upset because the Buddha was going for alms in the streets, and so of course his father invited him over and said, don't go for alms in the street. Don't act like a beggar. You're my son, you're a prince. But the Buddha very slowly taught the Dhamma to his family. But when he was there for that first visit after he attained awakening, Rahula was about 7. And as one story goes that Yashodhara, Rahula's mother, the Buddha's former wife, told Rahula, ask your father for your inheritance. So little Rahula ran to his dad, the Buddha, and asked for his inheritance, and the Buddha gave him an alms bowl. So then Rahula followed afterwards. This is how the story goes. And he was the first novice. So in this Rahula Ovada, at Mango Stone, it starts out with Rahula seeing the Buddha approaching him at a distance. He's wherever his lodging is, Rahula's lodging, or wherever he was sitting for the day's abiding. He sees the Buddha coming. And so he gets water for feet washing. And so the Buddha must have walked some distance to get to where Rahula was, and put out a place for him to sit, and paid respects to him. So the Buddha washed his feet, sat down, and there was, well, this. Let's imagine this is a larger vessel. Okay, so I could use my alms bowl. Anyway, so the Buddha says, you see how much water there's left in this vessel here? So it was a big vessel, and there was just a very small amount left in the vessel. And that small amount of water is compared to the recluseship of someone who lies. So a monastic who lies, who deliberately lies. And then he pours the water out. And then he says, if a recluse, if a samana deliberately lies, it's just like tossing out your monastic life. And then he turns it upside down and he says, it's also, see how he's turned it upside down, and Rahula is saying, yes, I see that. And he says, this is what's happening to your monastic life. your reckless ship, it's turned over if you tell deliberate lies. And then he shows the inside of the empty vessel and says, you see how this is empty? And he says, and Rahula says, yes. And then the Buddha says, this is how empty and hollow your monastic life is if you deliberately lie. So he was like really making this strong point about not lying to little Rahula. And then he further said that if you are in the habit, I guess, but he didn't say in the habit, but if you're willing to make a deliberate lie, then you're capable of doing any unwholesome, akusala action. If you're willing to cover it up with a lie. And this is, so he was just really like making a very strong point. And this is like out of care, out of care for his son. And it was, what's really interesting too is that he's using these illustrations, which really kind of is, if it's graphic like that, I didn't have water to toss, but it's like, it really puts it in one's mind. And also that kind of exchange too, because this Rahula would say, yes, sir. And I see that. Do you see this? He says, yes, sir. So telling a deliberate lie is the first thing he started with. And then he said, asked Rahula, what is a mirror for? And the little Rahula answers, it's for reflection. It's for making a reflection. And then he said, I have it written down here. It's like for every action through body, speech, and mind, we should reflect repeatedly. I think that's what it was saying. We need to reflect repeatedly. And the sutta continues, you reflect before you make an action, you reflect during the time you're making an action, and then after. And when I first read that, I was just, because if we don't have any mindfulness, then we're act impulsively. And so we should be reflecting, he was said body, speech, and mind. So he went through very much in detail of each body, speech, and mind about before I act, do a physical act. Do I do something, an action with the body? I should think, is this going to be for my harm, for someone else's harm, or for both? So, and then if you see that it's harmful in any of those cases, then you should desist, you should stop, you shouldn't, don't do it. And if you realize that, oh, it's not going to be of harm to anybody, then you can continue. Then you can go ahead and do it. And then while you're doing it, this is what I was thinking, because I mean, if you, especially you're in the act of doing it, so you have to really be mindful of every action you're making in the direction of doing something. And then, so if I'm breaking a precept, even if it's like a renunciant precept, that would be harming me, and also the trust that other people would have if I don't, if I don't clear it up. It depends on it. Some of the precepts are pretty minor, and it's not a moral or ethical breach of conduct, like eating after a certain time. But then I would feel kind of icky inside. I would feel like, oh, especially if I'm doing it sneakily. I heard this story, Ajahn Brahm tells this story about this anagarika, and he ate a sandwich in afternoon time, and then he felt so guilty, so ashamed. And then he went to Ajahn Brahm and he was like, oh, I was hungry and I ate in the afternoon. And, and, and Ajahn Brahm says, okay, well, just good. It's good that you confessed. That's very good. And then the Anagar says, well, isn't there some kind of punishment or something? And then Ajahn Brahm says, 30 strokes of the cat. And the cat is a cat of
nine tails.
cat of nine tails in Australia. So he said that Anagarika turned as white as his robes when he heard that. And he said, no, go find Kitty, I don't know the cat's name, at the monastery and pet him 30 times. So laying open what you've done or making amends if you've done something. But this was afterwards when you reflect back, oh, that was not so good. So before, during, and after an action. And another thing with action, there's steps you're taking. First, you're thinking about it. And if you don't restrain yourself at that point, then there's like every step you're taking towards like going to the kitchen to get the sandwich or something like that, but I think that if it's something that's really unwholesome, you're going to feel as you're about to do it. This is where the mindfulness is really important. The mindfulness of the body, you're going to feel this tension. If I'm doing something sneaky, then and in the monastic code, it's like a dukkata if you're doing a offense like taking something that you shouldn't be taking, every step towards that, or like every mouthful of the food that you're eating past the time, it's like a dukkata. So you need to for an anagarika, I think he was being really, but like for somebody's fully ordained and they go to another monastic, and so they would have to say sambahula.
Dantapani? No.
It would be
Pikala Bojane?
yeah, but it would be the dukkatas.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and it's more just of a kind of an feeling embarrassed a little bit to admit that you've done something. That most of the precepts are confessible offenses, but some of are not. You would lose your status as a monastic, or you might be on probation or something, depending on the severity of it. But I think just that mindfulness of what we're doing with our bodies at all times, and just even like if I'm going to the cupboard, there's some allowables in the cupboard, even if it's a good time. Why am I doing it? Is my mind overcome with greed? It's just because there's some chocolates, and they just somebody got some really gourmet chocolate allowables and they're in the cupboard. Or am I doing it, for like medicine? This is to give me energy for the afternoon, to appease the appetite a little bit, giving my blood sugar a chance to kind of be a little, more even and such. So I have to think about it, and then reaching for the cupboard door, and opening it up and taking it. And there at any point along the way, I can say, oh, is this for my benefit really? Or is it for my harm? Am I feeding greed? Or am I nourishing myself? So these are all very minor things, but in some breach of the precepts can be really harmful. So we have to be really in tune to if we've done something too, and that feeling of remorse and regret the Buddha talks about, it can be actually a positive um, motivation that it's good to make amends as much as we can, but that feeling of remorse, it's not like we wallow around it and beat ourselves up for the rest of our lives, but it's, this, I broke the precepts, this wasn't good, I did some harm to somebody else, I did some harm to me. And then so we acknowledge it, and then we can eventually we let go, but it's not that we for the rest of our lives we regret what we did. I have a little story about when I was still a householder and married, and I was renting an apartment and with my husband, and there was a little mouse in the electric stove, and we talked about it. And so my husband got the snap traps that'll kill a mouse. So I put it in the stove. Next morning, there was a little mouse in there, and I just felt so terrible. Felt so sad and terrible because I saw the little mouse. I held the trap with the mouse, and oh, and then I never did that again. I just felt so much regret. Now I wouldn't intentionally kill or try not to harm other living beings, so we try to very carefully remove them. I know it scares them, but I do my best not to harm them. So so to intentionally do something that causes harm to other living beings, either through body and then through speech. Speech is really challenging, like because we have a thought, and sometimes without even thinking, it's almost simultaneously what we speak as what we're thinking. So it's almost like we have to slow this whole process down a little bit. In this culture, that speed is praised and valued, and you can get things done really quickly, and you have ideas and you put them out, and then everybody's trying to get their ideas out, and you're competing with one another with your thoughts and ideas. And so sometimes we can be really careless with speech. And I know for myself, useless speech, the sampapalapa is the Pali word for useless speech or trivial speech. So we have to be careful that the speech is true, the speech is useful, that it's kind, and spoken in a timely manner. But thing with speech is that we can say, "Oh, excuse me," right away. I'm sorry, I was a little bit more harsh, or actually what I said wasn't entirely true or something like that. So if we catch ourselves in, that's the thing he's talking about before and then during. So during the time we're talking to another person, then we go, oh, actually, what I just said is, this not quite true, or, not, or maybe we don't need to speak about this now. It's kind of, not important or whatever. So as we're speaking, even, we can correct our speech, especially if we have a kalyana mittas. And this is a thing in the sutta too. He said if he did have a breach of precepts or did something that was harmful to another person, if you have a kalyana mitta, if you have a good spiritual companion, if you have wise companions that are in the Dhamma path, then we can go to them And, you know, so I know there's some groups that they have a regular practice, maybe fortnightly on the new and full moons, where they just speak to their kalyan, their friend in the Dhamma. And this is what the monastics do, is on the new and full moons, we do what's called parisuddhi, or we have the patimokkha recitation. And then if before we have the recitation or declare our purity, then we do confession, or we say, well, now I can't think of anything to confess, because we're doing it regularly enough. Or we might talk about something that it wasn't quite confessable, but we didn't feel was quite right, or something like that. I didn't feel so good about doing this or that, even though it's not confessable, or but that way, or check with one another too, about, well, I did this, and it's really close. In this day and age, sometimes it's like it's hard to really pinpoint whether it's within the monastic code or outside of it that we've broken it, or because the culture is different, the time is different. So then we check with one another about certain things, like how we understand it. But that way we're becoming more clear about it, and we're just laying it, what's called laying it open. Just being honest about what we're doing. So that's through body and speech, and through mind. The Buddha talks about looking, and the mental actions, even though we're not doing anything externally, can this be harmful to another person or another being? I think if I'm cultivating a lot of anger towards somebody, even though if I don't say anything, people feel it. But then it's harmful to me, and it could potentially be harmful to another person, but we're not particularly breaking a precept. So in that case, he doesn't talk about making amends and confessing, but he says that we should examine that and then abandon that unwholesome mental fabrication, and also feel a certain amount of. I looked up the words that were in Pali. There's a really strong language about feeling terrible about yourself. It sounds like almost, not quite, but some amount of shame, some amount of remorse about having the unwholesome, the akusala dhammas in the mind. I think it's very similar to hiriotapa, where you have the dread and what's called dread and shame, where fear of doing something wrong, but having the mental qualities that are akusala, feeling, especially if it's like really strong greed, or really strong anger, or really strong hatred, to feel a certain amount of at least distaste, and that I really need to stop this, I really need to abandon this habit. I can't keep cultivating it. So some way to just turn from that behavior. It's not like, I don't think we should add aversion to aversion if you're, or unwholesome mental state to but it's more about wishing to rise above those states, having it, but it's also like, oh, I know what it is. There's a simile I made up. If you're walking along and you see dog poo on the sidewalk, you don't step in it. You step around it. Or if it's in your yard or something like that, and you can take a trowel and you move it and you put it, in a proper place, compost it or something like that. Don't step in it, but take care of it. Don't, yeah, so clean it up. But then if there's no, you can see in yourself that the mental states are kusala, you haven't been having unwholesome mental states, then you can rejoice. And it says, train in the Dhamma day and night, is what the Buddha said to little Rahula. And for all three, body, speech, and mind, those activities, if we see that we're engaging in wholesome activities and beneficial activities, skillful activities, and then we can just rejoice. We can be happy that we're keeping our precepts pure and keeping the mind free of as much as we can. Until we're arahants, we're not going to be completely free of unwholesome mental states. But we can have periods of time, or we could see, for the most part, what's coming up is wholesome mental states. Or in the evening, I've been working at abandoning the hindrances, and at this point that the mind is free, and so then we can apply ourselves to bhavana, really in earnest, whatever objective meditation we have, we can do that joyfully. There'll be joy in our hearts because we're not struggling to push away the defilements that have a tendency to come seeping in. So it's something to feel joy in, and that's giving us energy, that's giving us nutriment for our practice when we can see that the mind is free. So the Buddha really encourages us to rejoice in that goodness in ourselves. We can rejoice in other people's goodness too. That's mudita, but there's chagam nusati, where our good actions we can rejoice in. So this is that teaching that the Buddha shared with Rahula, with a little bit of my commentary. It's not verbatim to an extent. I think I've gotten all that was spoken. That's all that I was translated. Do you have anything to?
Sadhu.
Sadhu. Do you have anything to add to this?
I think the peacefulness comes from that, the purity of the examining before, during, after. And then, because I know for a time period, I would go to the cushion and things would just, come up. And it's like, oh, I'd forgotten about that. Oh, I'd forgotten about that. And
something you've done, or
yeah, something I'd done, or
okay.
and something, just even something that I'd asked for forgiveness for, but it was still like chewing at me.
Oh, okay.
And so it takes a while for that, like for it to settle down, and then out of the settling, I think, and settling it with the metta and with the Brahma Viharas, and then the meditation really has a space.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a gradual training that has Sila right there at the beginning.
Right. Well, I have a lot of years of the behavior that wasn't so skillful. And then sometimes I look back at my past and I was like, oh, I was kind of feel embarrassed, ashamed, or something like that. And then I tell myself, I'm not doing it. I gave that a long time ago.
Right.
I'm not doing it anymore. That's past, that's gone. Been there, done that, and not doing it again. And then I can rejoice in that I've abandoned that type of behavior. But there is that, and that kind of, it's like, does it's kind of feeling unclean, or yeah, icky inside or something like that, we can just say, oh, this is my protection against ever doing those kind of things again. It's not something I'm interested in doing, but also, yeah, this, you know, don't want to do it again. Do you have any questions on this?
I do have a question, actually.
Yeah,
So you both kind of described a feeling like regret that comes from breaking precepts. So there are many people who will just break precepts and they just keep breaking them. People who kill bugs, maybe
Yep.
not even what's wrong, or people who buy what's wrong. But do they feel that kind of regret that comes with their behavior? I'm wondering if kind of regret is a natural thing for people to have that's covered over, or some people just don't have the capacity. It's like,
I think
yeah,
very few people don't have the capacity. I mean, that is an actual illness, and it's not that it's a small percentage of society that has such an illness.
yeah, there's a
But
psychological condition.
yeah, there is a psychological condition
Yeah,
that can be that way, but it's not the vast majority of the people. Vast majority of the people, we're just living in a deluded state, and like just don't feel it, don't feel it, don't feel it, and numb it, justify it, I'll just overlay it. But and a lot of people will say, oh, I just can't meditate. Well, this is partly why.
yeah. So when the Buddha went into all that detail about not lying, part of it is that if you're lying or you think it's okay to break precepts, then you're deluding yourself. So you're actually lying to yourself and that, oh, it's okay. They're not going to notice it, or they deserve it, or whatever it is, or convincing yourself that, oh, it's just bugs. They're just stupid animals, or, so, but yeah, it's creating these, yeah, it's lies to ourselves, a delusion, and so there's a lot of justification, and that's a kind of like, like the feeling of I'm doing this and I don't care, but you're closing off your heart, and so there's a lot of discomfort around that. So I think it's very confused and it's blocked and it's, um, but they don't have the wisdom to see what they're doing to themselves and they don't have the wisdom to see how harming others is also harming themselves. But I think, yeah, somebody has to, that's some kind of psychosis to just completely have no sense of morality, no sense of ethics, and no feeling around that. And then there's also, there may be like your your the people you associate with. I will be kind and honest just with these people around me, and then everybody else, it's okay for me to
I protect my family, but
I
nobody
protect
else.
my family, but nobody else.
Yeah.
I'll be, and so you have no scruples about, some people have no scruples about harming others. Yeah, so but it's a distancing, it's a cutting yourself off, it's a numbing, like you were
Lying to yourself.
lying to yourself, convincing yourself, justifying.
Thrusting yourself further into delusion,
Yeah,
which will condition your rebirth.
and then there's also who you associate with, and like if cussing and lying and stealing and all that is all within the group you're with. And there's a sense of that's okayness, but there's still a sense of we're going to get in trouble somehow, maybe because of our behavior. There's there has to be some understanding of consequences. But yeah, but it's not based on wisdom or really seeing direct cause and effect or willingness to admit that I'm getting myself in deep trouble.
Does it seem like that to you or something otherwise? Yeah, as far as that it's coming out of delusion or
Yeah,
that's
sense. I feel like at least of the people I know in my life, there isn't that many. It's very rare that it's coming from even I think the most malicious person I ever knew. It wasn't they were like that all the time.
right.
It was clear that they also had
A sense
some
of
greater
consciousness.
but
Yeah,
sometimes they just
chose.
yeah.
Mhm.
Right. Well, the
Yep.
thing is, the Buddha talks about being overcome by greed, hate, and delusion, and that's why people break the precepts. So if I'm overcome by greed and I steal something that's, something's just easy for me to take, and then the desire for it is really strong, and then I take it. Then I'm living in fear of being caught. Or I convince myself that it's okay, no one's going to care or something like that. But then you're living with that discomfort. And then people, have these affairs with, people, and then they're living in fear that someone's going to find out, that they've,
Double life.
or either it's ongoing or they've done, gone out with somebody's partner, spouse or whatever, and so much anxiety and it's like there's a little bit of a thrill and then there's a lot of dread and fear, and then or people find out and it's just a mess. It just ends up being a real mess. And even if the people supposedly are in agreement that that's okay, a lot of times it just makes, I mean, their lives just become really complex, and yeah, I've just only seen harm in that. That it's caused harm when people didn't respect each other's relationships. But it's done out of lust or greed or hatred. And then there's like overcome or overwhelmed with jealousy and anger. It's like murdering their own spouse. I heard a story of a woman who was in Calcutta, not Calcutta. It's a, I can't think of it. There's a prison, it's not Calcutta, what is it called? Anyway, in California, there's a woman's penitentiary, and she murdered her husband. She found out he was having an affair with somebody in a hotel room, and then she didn't remember actually doing it. She remembered getting the knife.
Mhm.
And then but she just was so overwhelmed with rage, and then then she was in prison. Chalchilla, that's what it's called. Chalchilla. It's close. That's okay. But anyway, yeah, so that's why we have to be really careful about the emergence of these unwholesome mental states and a tendency towards that, and not justifying them or allowing them to just to fester in our hearts, because then if we're overwhelmed by them, we may do things that we regret for the rest of our lives. So someone without any training in the Dhamma, working with the mind and seeing even just the very inklings of hatred and anger,
Pushing it.
yeah, then it's more, or that attachment. So the person that was insanely jealous and murdered their spouse, which happens too frequently, So there's that attachment and to the person. I mean, sure, maybe that may be upsetting, but to be just overwhelmed by hatred and anger and jealousy, that you would react that way, is because of attachment, so strong attachment.
And delusion as to what the solution is.
Well,
Yeah.
she just went insane, I guess. She was overwhelmed by anger.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, that would be delusion, because she'd completely blocked. She couldn't remember actually doing it. So we don't want to end on that note. So instead,
Let's celebrate the good stuff.
instead we rejoice that we don't. Yeah, so just being careful not to see and admit to how attached we are, and to see, you know, what happens if we don't. I know.
This is slow. It's the clock.
It's a clock. Okay. So yeah. So we can rejoice that we are training in the Buddhist teaching of Dhamma, that we have this opportunity to cultivate the wholesome states. And we can rejoice. Yeah, I just want to celebrate.
Leave on a celebratory note. We could say, pay homage to the Buddha. Is that our celebratory note?
Okay. Araham Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhamma Dhammam Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Well, thank you all for joining us.
And have a happy birthday.
And happy